Hi guys, this is Crystal from Glittery Crystals. I invite you to subscribe to our channel. This is our first tumbler here on YouTube, and today I will demonstrate how easy it is to make this beautiful tumbler. It's one of the easiest you will ever do, so please stay with us and let's get started. I have here already prepped, cleaned, and spray painted my cup. It doesn't have to have a nice even spray painted coat. These are the two glitters I will be using, Rose Gold and Unicorn Fart from our collection. I will leave the link down below. I will be using Mod Podge to glue the glitter, and I will use electrical tape to help me mark where I want both glitters. So starting from the top part of the cup, you will guide your electrical tape where you want it to set. I am positioning as close as half and half. It doesn't have to be exactly half. You don't have to measure. You can just eyeball it. That's what I did here. And as a matter of fact, the rose gold will take a bit more space than the white glitter. So once you have that ready, we will start applying pressure just to make sure the electrical tape will not move from its place. So now I will be using Mod Podge to spread it on that half of the cup. And if you've used Mod Podge before, you know that it dries super quick. So I'm just trying to apply the Mod Podge as quick as I can without going too much over of the electrical tape. You have to make sure that the edges are well covered with Mod Podge because you do want a crisp line. If you go a bit over the electrical tape, there's nothing to worry. We will remove this tape once we are done with the white part. So before I apply my glitter, I want to run the brush on the entire part with Mod Podge just to make sure everything's wet and none of the parts have dried. Now we will grab Unicorn Fart and we will just spread it evenly on the entire part where Mod Podge is. As you can see below, I have a piece of parchment paper. You can use computer paper, whatever kind of paper you have, so you can catch all the glitter that is falling. And after you're done, you can just put it back into your container and use it. Once I was done with that first layer, I let it sit for a few seconds while I collected the glitter that was left in the parchment paper. And as you can see, I am adding a second coat of Mod Podge. Make sure you are not scraping the glitter. You don't want any of the glitter to actually lift from you applying a second layer. So be gentle the second step. And the process is the same. After I'm done applying Mod Podge, I go over it again with my brush just to make sure the Mod Podge is still wet. I apply the glitter and I make sure that the entire part is fully covered with glitter. This white is an iridescent glitter and it pairs so beautifully with the rose gold that we will apply. So this is the end result. You can sort of see some strikes from the brush, but don't worry, that's all gonna even out once we apply the epoxy. So as you can see, I am at this point removing the tape. If you let the tape sit longer and you let your Mod Podge actually dry, once you try to lift the tape, it will all be a mess. It will lift the glitter from the cup. So you want to do it right after you're done putting the glitter. So now we will start with the second half. We will do the same process, apply Mod Podge with thin coats, and then once it's done, we will apply our rose gold glitter. When you're applying, make sure you are covering the edges very well. Do not be afraid to put the second coat of a darker glitter on top of the white. If you actually let your glitter, the first one, which is the white, if you let it sit for a few minutes, it will be completely dry and you will not have an issue. You can easily remove it once you're done. So don't be afraid that whatever rose gold fell on top of the white will stain it. We'll take care of that later. And this is just with one coat. For me, it was good enough coverage, but since I did 2 layers of Mod Podge with the white one, I have to do the same with this rose gold because I don't want it to look uneven. I don't want one coat to look thicker than the other one. Now I will use a compressed air can to blow off the rose gold from the white. Now, I made a mistake here and you will see it in a minute. I actually pressed really hard and my mistake was that the white Mod Podge was still a bit wet. So when I pressed really hard on the can, it actually lifted some of that white glitter. Now, if this happens to you, or if you make a mistake like I did right here, I will show you how to fix it. So I grabbed some of that Mod Podge and I was dabbing just that part where I made the mistake. And I am trying to level as closely as possible with that Mod Podge to make it sort of even. Once it's as close as I can actually do it, I will be using my white glitter, apply some more. I will dab the axis and I will just use my fingers to sort of press in the glitter. As you can see, it doesn't look like there was a mistake. Once we apply the epoxy on top, it will solve that issue. So now I am adding the second coat of rose gold. And you do have to be very careful because we don't have that electrical tape that is going to help us not go over the area that we are covering. So just be very careful at the edges. Clean them up before you apply the glitter. And as I said it before, once I'm done, I just run my brush over and make sure that all these edges are wet and the process of repeating. So now that we are done applying our glitters and we have cleaned the edges up, I will be using this crystal clear enamel from Rust-Oleum. This will prevent the rose gold to bleed into the white once we are applying our epoxy. After I applied a good coat, I will let it fully dry. At this time, I let it dry 3 hours. I didn't epoxy right away, but you can just let it dry. If you need it quickly, just let it dry and then mix your epoxy and move on to the next step. So as you can see, I used 30 mLs, 15 part A, 15 part B. I mixed it. I roughly mix my epoxy. I don't mind all the bubbles because I use the torch and I will get rid of them. So I don't mind mixing that fast. And please don't mind the other 2 tumblers that I have churning. I was actually taking advantage that I was, using my epoxy to have other cups churning. And you will see those videos later on. So make sure that you apply an even coat on the entire cup. And as you can see, none of that rose gold is bleeding through the white because we use that Rust-Oleum clear enamel. Okay, before we let it run, I will be using my heat torch to remove or to pop any bubbles I see. Most of them you cannot see them, but I just pass it through just to make sure. And I will also clean up the rim just to remove any excess epoxy. So right here, it's been already 12 hours since I let it cure. It's pretty much smooth. So now I will grab a piece of paper, alcohol, and I will clean up my tumbler because we've touched it. So I'm gonna clean it up and we will start applying the vinyl. I actually cut up these strips of vinyl with my Cricut, and also the word that we will be applying, all of those were cut with the same Cricut. And this vinyl I actually purchased from Amazon. I will try and see if I can find the link to where I purchased this product, and I can leave it in the description below. Make sure that you do cut it big enough that it will cover from one side to another one. So I just applied it, and I will just rub my fingers through the vinyl, make sure there's no lumps. Once I'm satisfied with the position of the vinyl, I will just rub my fingers one last time. And now I will start lifting the transfer tape. So I find it easier to tape the axis on the inside of the cup. That way I can remove the transfer tape. So right before that, I used a really sharp X-Acto knife to cut the edges. I will do the same thing with the bottom part. I will lift part of that transfer tape in order for me to cut where I want the vinyl to stop. Make sure you do not cut deeper than the epoxy. It will scrape, the X-Acto knife will scrape the epoxy, but that is not an issue. The second layer of epoxy will cover that. We will just repeat the same steps from the other side. Now let's position the word where we want it. Make sure the entire word fits correctly on the white part. So once I have it in the position that I want it, I will lift the transfer tape and I will cut just the smallest piece of the backing of the vinyl. This way I make sure that my vinyl is secured and it won't go anywhere. So now I will start lifting the backing, but make sure that the vinyl is actually stuck to the transfer tape. And you want to do it a little bit slower than what I'm doing, because if you pull up really strongly, you can actually rip the vinyl. So make sure you're taking your time and you're just doing it in sections. That's all we're going to do. We're going to start ripping up the backing of the vinyl in pieces. And there you have it. So before I remove the transfer tape, I do make sure that I press each section of the vinyl, just to make sure everything's really attached to the cup. I love this cup. This is a gorgeous, easy, beautiful cup. I love it. I love everything about it. So once again, we will use our napkin with alcohol, and I will just clean it up before we apply our second layer of epoxy. Look at this beauty. I just can't with this cup. It's so beautiful. It's actually gonna be gifted. Once again, I am using 30 mLs of epoxy, 15 part A, 15 part B. And I am making sure that the vinyl is very well covered with epoxy. Once again, I will use my torch. This part is crucial, especially where we apply the vinyl. The bubbles tend to show more where the vinyl is. So I am making sure that I'm popping those bubbles. I will pass the torch and I will let it spin one round and then pass it again, because I don't want to melt the epoxy. So this is the result of the tumbler with one layer of epoxy. What I'm doing here is I am using a 320 grit sanding paper. I am just passing it where the edges of the cup are, from the rim, from the edges on the bottom, also on the entire tumbler, just making sure I am getting rid of all those little bumps. Once you're done sanding it, you need to make sure that you actually clean it with alcohol. You want to remove all of that dust that you made with the epoxy and the sanding paper. And I actually do it I do this step twice. I like to make sure everything is really nice and clean before I applied my last layer of epoxy. I mixed a small amount of epoxy this time because everything's smooth. So I really just want to add a really thin layer of epoxy just to bring the shine of the glitter back to life. And I am making sure the entire cup is well coated. My cup is trying to fall off the turning machine because I don't have an attachment for this size, but everything's fine. We didn't have any issues. We are using our heat gun once again. Every time we apply epoxy, we use our heat gun to pop those bubbles. We will let it spin for 6 hours and we will let it fully cure for 72 hours depending on the epoxy you are using. Well, there you go, my lovely glittery crystals. This is the end result of this beautiful tumbler. I hope you loved it. It is super easy, super fast. It is a great gift if you want to give it out for Mother's Day. You have time. If you want to start your tumbler business, this is a great way to start. It's an easy cup that a lot of customers would actually enjoy. You can customize this. You don't have to have the word faith. You can change it for a name, another phrase. It's up to you. I hope you loved this video. Please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and we hope to see you back soon. Bye.